Story 1. I don't know if it's common, but it's a daily occurrence for me. My coworker is the most long-winded person I have ever known. He's a smart guy, good at his job, and in general I like working with him. But I have to be extremely careful when I ask him any question. I need to make sure that I really want to know the answer, and I have to formulate the question carefully. This is because he can easily take 20 minutes to answer a yes or no question. He goes into tons of irrelevant back history, digressions, anecdotes, reminiscences, and various trivia before getting around to answering the question. I'm not exaggerating. There have been times when I have asked him a question, and in response, he rambled on so long that I completely forgot what I had asked by the time he was finished. It's maddening. Story 2. When someone interrupts you, you do that weird dance where both people try to resume what they were saying at the same time, and then the other person just talks over you louder. It's such a red flag for main character syndrome, in my opinion. Story 3. When whatever I say is met with complete silence. Not even a MHM or anything. Especially infuriating when I'm answering a question. Like, how hard would it be to acknowledge that you heard me talking? Story 4. At work, when people don't answer your question, but respond with an indirect answer that avoids what you're trying to find out. It's as if they want to keep the information from you in some weird power move. Story 5. My wife has a bad habit of consistently cutting me off to the point that I have to say something like, "Okay, I have something to say, and I need for you to listen." Once, we went to a catering event and my in-laws asked how I am doing. I got 2 words out, and they started talking amongst themselves. Story 6. What really ticks me off in a conversation is when someone plays the one-up game. You share something you are proud of, like landing a new job or achieving a goal, and instead of being happy for you, they immediately start talking about how they have done something even better. It is not just dismissive, it feels like they see every interaction as a competition. Another one is fake listening. You know when someone nods and goes, "Yeah, totally," but their response has nothing to do with what you said? It is not just lazy. It shows they do not respect your time or thoughts. I would rather they admit they are distracted than fake it. Lastly, I cannot stand when someone turns every conversation into a vent session about their problems. Everyone needs to unload sometimes, sure, but if it is all the time, it is draining. At some point, it stops being a conversation and becomes emotional dumping. Story 7. When someone constantly refers to a person as their husband or wife. I have known both of you for 15 years. Just say Sarah. I know you aren't talking about a distant cousin or stranger from the context. Story 8. Ask questions with a preconceived notion and answer for me. An in-law asked me if my husband and I travel. Then their friend, whom I've met once for 5 seconds several years ago, responded for me with, "No, they don't look like they travel." I don't know how someone looks like they travel. I've been to 14 countries and 22 cities in the last 4 years, not counting the repeated visits to a few countries and cities. Story 9. People who repeatedly use your name in conversations always feel weird and gross, like they are trying to ingratiate themselves with you or manipulate you. Story 10. Coworkers like to complain about other workers they don't like, but when I point out that someone they do like isn't doing something they know they are supposed to do, they immediately change the topic. You will complain about one person forgetting something, but will not acknowledge one of your friends is actively avoiding a task. If we are going to have a complaining contest, at least complain fairly. Story 11. Ask a question and then ask a different unrelated question before I get the whole answer out to the first. Okay, conversation ends and I disengage. Long retired, I do not have to put up with anything. Story 12. Zero context name dropping. At least give me a single sentence description of this person, or at least how they are related to you so I can attempt to follow along in your conversation. Story 13. When people of my white, boomer parents' generation or demographic feel the need to identify traits only about certain specific people in their stories, for example, this friendly black gentleman at the store or the heavier waitress who served us, the gay barista, even if those particular details are irrelevant to the story being recounted. Story 14. You know when you're talking to a coworker, classmate, or whatever, and that person seems nice, so you say something like, "Hey bro, that's how I refer to everyone. Want to hang out this weekend?" And they say, "Yeah, what's the plan?" but then flat out refuse your proposal when you say that your plan doesn't involve paying for stuff. It can be just biking with that friend while talking to know that person better, even better, biking early and taking a bag with food and coffee to have breakfast outside, or even working out with you. I have moved out of my country. Those things were normal there, but here where I'm living now, only older people understand me when I explain how much those rejections, not talking about dates, annoy me. People my age here feel like they only hang out if there's somewhere to spend money instead of having simple and actual fun. Thank God I don't have money to study here anymore, and I'm going back in January. Technically, it's bad news for my studies, but for my social life, it's the best news ever. Story 15. People who interrupt someone else's story to tell their own. The reason it makes me so angry is I have severe attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. My desire to do this is probably 10 times more overwhelming, but I still stop myself. I force myself to listen and pay active attention when someone else is telling a story. I say over and over in my brain, remember, this isn't about me. I am not going to make this about me. I am going to make that person feel good about themselves by listening. I am not even going to tell my related story when they are finished. So it makes me upset when neurotypicals can't do that. Story 16, my brother-in-law and I were talking casually about something mundane, but I said, as a figure of speech kind of thing, and it was obvious. He cut me off and said, I don't actually, with such arrogance. It was one of the most awkward ends to a conversation I've had in a minute, but I guess that's that. Story 17. Someone who won't let you get a word in when they know you have a comment about what is being discussed. It's not about interrupting them, but making it a two-way conversation instead of just the person talking at you. Story 18. When someone is fully focused on themselves and doesn't bother to listen to you, only responding with a quick cool, and continuing to babble with all that, it's frustrating because I always make sure to listen to what people have to say and respond with genuine interest and thought. People are interesting and all share different lives with their own stories. I wish more people weren't so self-focused. You can really learn something from others, Story 19. When you have a discussion about something traumatic that happened to you and they just kind of respond with something like, oh, that's sad. Anyways, like, dang man, that's all you had to say about that? I would be more upset if I actually helped them with something traumatic. A lack of empathy one way on a two-way street is agonizing. Story 20. I work with a supervisor who will ask me a question, and as I formulate an answer and respond, he will interrupt me with an answer. I just stare at him. I've thrown my hat and safety glasses a few times, in one ear and out the other. If the questions were simple yes or no, it would be easier to snap an answer off and avoid the whole situation. The questions aren't simple, and I often have to consider several mitigating conditions to provide a clear and proper response. It's frustrating as hell. My crew, all senior technicians who are well organized, have picked up on my rage and emulate him when they are feeling froggy. In jest, of course, but it gets my blood boiling just the same. Story 21. Somebody subtly forcing me to ask them a question. It feels like low-grade manipulation, which is something I'm just really averse to. For example, you will not believe who I saw at the grocery store. Some people do this all the time, and it really drives me up a wall. Story 22. When in conversation and someone interrupts to finish what they think you are going to say. Especially aggravating when they are wrong. It is equally annoying when someone says something, then moves on to a completely different subject before you have a chance to reply. It is like, do you back up to the last topic or give up and move on to the new one? Even worse is when they incorrectly finish what you are trying to say, then move on to a new subject before you have a chance to correct them. Story 23. I once knew a shopkeeper who would ask after you, but would try to guess at what you would say, and would move her mouth as you spoke and actually say the last words. Mostly at the same time as I did. Really frustrating and irritating. Story 24. Over-explaining in certain situations, especially at work. If there's time to talk, whatever, but many times I'll go up to someone at work and ask something like, where do you need the item to go? And I'll get a 10-minute explanation on what the item does, how they got it, and why they need it. Great. But where does it go? Story 25. My wife will do this sometimes. I'll be talking about something, and she will do other things and won't listen to me. I just stop talking and refuse to finish what I'm talking about. Story 26. Lying. People are so casual about it. I know you're not doing great every single time I see you. I know you don't actually want to get together sometime. Just stop. Story 27. Trauma dump unprompted. And if we don't know each other that closely, no, it doesn't make you seem special or interesting. It makes me concerned for both of our safety. Story 28. Loud, nervous laughs freak me out. Nodding quickly and saying, yes, got it. When you know they don't is off-putting. Training with someone at work like this. Story 29. This happens all the time. There isn't much you can do. They don't see the problem and are only interested in their voice, contradicting and correcting you. But if they just contradict and correct you, you can have a bit of fun. I've done this. Start to subtly change your opinion to the polar opposite and watch as they change theirs to correct you. Story 30. When I get asked for the 150th time if I'm going home for Christmas or holidays, etc., I am home. I live here. For over 10 years now. Visiting your family is something else. And I'm an adult. I have normal vacations going somewhere else. Story 31. The political probe. People who immediately try to see where you are on the political or religious spectrum, like asking who I voted for. It's a secret ballot for a reason, and it's rude as hell to ask people what their vote was. Story 32. People who keep getting all touchy and invade your personal space when you're just trying to have a conversation. Whenever they laugh, it feels like they're spitting on your face. Story 33. Phrasing statements as questions. I'm sure it's a kind of microaggression because your brain attempts to answer the question rather than address the observation. For example, who saved that file in that folder? Instead of, I have found the file, asking who did it makes people feel guilty and in need of justifying the location of the file, even if it's the correct place or it wasn't them anyway. Or, why is there water leaking all over the floor? Instead of, let's stop the leak. It turns every situation into an inquisition. Story 34. You know when you can see a person's eyes glaze over, and you just know they've stopped listening. They're only thinking about what they're going to say next, usually to try and top you in what you're talking about. Story 35. For me, it is in heated or even friendly conversations. If you literally will not concede any points, I will immediately assume you are closed-minded and stubborn. Story 36. So being interrupted takes the cake, apparently. I got some work to do. I swear I don't do it to be rude. I'm actually listening so intently and am just excited to connect most of the time, like that silly donkey from Shrek. But I can appreciate that most people don't see it that way. Someone else mentioned it being a cultural thing, and I wonder if my cultural background is a factor in this as well. Story 37. 99% of the conversations I have on a daily basis are one-sided. The other persons don't ask me any questions. The people I've worked with for over 6 years know almost nothing about me. Story 38. When someone thinks they know what I am about to say and tries to complete the statement or extrapolate from it, but they are way off base. There is a strong overlap between people who do this and people who interrupt. I have been guilty of it, but it annoys me so much that I try really hard not to do it anymore. It takes just a few seconds of listening to allow your conversation partner to complete their thoughts. You can use this time to come up with a valid response. Story 39. I don't like it when people keep talking when I already comprehend what they're saying mid-sentence. I get it, it's not in their control or their fault. It's a problem of mine. It still makes me irrationally disturbed. I also do something that annoys people, and that's using the word wormst instead of where, because unbeknownst to them, wormst is contextual and requires place, why, and what time. Story 40. When you tell someone something that happened to you or something you felt or thought, and then they tell you that it didn't happen. Bonus points if they personally witnessed it happening and have acknowledged previously that it did happen, but now for some reason have changed their mind. Story 41. When I am sharing my thoughts on a particular subject, relaying an interesting news story or anecdote, and trying to open up a discussion about it, the other person disregards everything I just said and responds with a completely unrelated comment, as if I said nothing. It irritates me to no end and makes me feel completely unheard. It is even worse if it happens in a group setting. Story 42. Interrupting me. I try to tell a story or just say anything, and you start talking about something you just thought of and had to say before forgetting it. Story 43. If somebody has one of their AirPods in their ear while talking to me, it really frustrates me, and I try to steer away from the conversation as much as possible. Story 44. Notable users of this debating style include Ben Shapiro and, within the narrow limits of his coherence, Donald Trump. Story 45. Find a way to turn any conversation back to them. Some people I have met will always respond to anything with something about themselves. They will never ask any genuine questions or contribute to the conversation. They only talk to you so they can say something about themselves.